In the world of video games, there has been a war brewing that has been going on for almost 20 years, and you're not going to believe who it's between. You see, people talk about the console war as if PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox are the big players in this space. But what people really don't understand what's happening right now is that we are moving towards what's called the platform war. And it turns out that people who used to work at other companies that started new ones are now the ones going head to head in the actual space of getting your time and your dime. And all of this started 13 years ago. You see, some of you may know this and some of you may not. Gabe Newell, the creator of Steam and Valve, used to work for Microsoft. In fact, he was working there before creating Half-Life itself and Steam, the online storefront that we use on PC today, the most ubiquitous online storefront. 13 years ago, however, it turns out that Microsoft decided to launch what I would consider to be one of the worst operating systems they've ever launched, which is Windows 8, and Gabe Newell had a few choice words to say. Back in 2012, Gabe Newell said this: "I think Windows 8 is a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space." And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Windows 7 was far better at the time. Everybody was still reeling after what we saw with Windows Vista, and seeing the future of what Windows was doing wasn't in the right space overall. This continuation of trying to go ahead and lock things down with games for Windows Live, requiring a walled garden of sorts of this entire branch of an open platform, and basically trying to control an entire gaming space, and thereby making things even worse for the actual user itself. And believe it or not, Windows 8 was so bad that Gabe Newell decided himself that he felt that Linux would be the way of the future for gaming, and thus the project of Steam OS was in fact born. Fast forward those 13 years and things are looking pretty good for Steam, Valve, and not too great for Microsoft. What's happening now is you're seeing things like Steam OS and Linux and Bazzite especially go through and start taking larger chunks of that actual market share. Sure, it may not be the billion plus users we're seeing right now on Windows, but you're counting every single main operating suite, not just for gaming, but also for enterprise as well. And even though Steam OS and Linux are not huge players right now in the gaming space, you can clearly see there's going to be ramifications moving forward as more and more game devices like Lenovo Legion Go S's and everything else begin to use Steam OS specifically, not having to pay Microsoft for those royalties of having Windows on their device and every other thing in between that has Windows bloatware on it. In fact, it's gotten so crazy that it turns out that Windows may have been the problem all along. According to Windows Central, in an article published in May of this year, it says this: "In an embarrassment for Microsoft, Steam OS seems to destroy Windows 11 on gaming performance and battery life, as well as usability. The first direct and natively supported comparison between identical Windows 11 and Steam OS gaming hardware is here, and it's pretty much a bloodbath for Microsoft." You see, just a few years ago, Steam released the Steam Deck, which honestly, I use mine basically every single day. I absolutely love this thing. It's really great, and the updates they've done into the game mode and everything else, and even how desktop operates, and removing a lot of the scary parts of Linux that make people freak out about it, has been pretty great overall. The thing is, though, that chunk of users being removed by the Steam Deck and being placed onto Steam OS and Linux is something Microsoft has been keeping a very keen eye on. In fact, we saw this happen with the Legion Go S, where Steam now went away from the Steam Deck itself and is providing their own operating system for free, mind you, to every other device, as you can see right here. And the more updates that happen, the better that things get, and the more competition begins to happen in the operating system space. Dare I even say the platform space. because even YouTubers like Dave2D were basically saying that Windows 11 was in fact the problem with the review of the Legion Go S itself. And we've also seen other big changes happening with Microsoft specifically, where they were talking about having to debloat Windows on its own and trying to provide a game mode suitable for that kind of platform, especially with their release of the Asus ROG Ally and ROG Ally X. But the thing is, sometimes you can't let all of Windows go for some weird particular reason. And even though Xbox has done a lot of work for their new OS and the new layer being added on top of Windows to debloat quite a few things, you're still seeing the Windowsification of these devices and hardware. You're seeing things like Teams, OneDrive, Outlook, and other things begin to bloat and take over more of your actual OS itself, especially when you're having a dedicated gaming device like the ROG Ally and the ROG Ally X. I don't think anybody's going to be installing Teams on their actual devices. They're probably going to be using Discord instead. And that was one of the big criticisms I've always had with what Xbox was trying to do with having their own kind of UI or game mode applied to their next gen console and even these devices as well in previous videos. So you're probably thinking to yourself, Alex, what's the point of all this? Why are you bringing up the Steam OS? Why are you talking about stuff that happened 13 years ago? How does that have to do anything with what's going on today? Well, it turns out a few days ago, Microsoft officially pulled the plug on Windows 10, leaving a huge amount of users stranded on PC, and especially the ones that game directly on the PC platform and use Steam. These are users ripe for the picking from Valve to move over to SteamOS and even Linux and Bazzite. And the fact that they've had their proof of concepts being worked on already with SteamOS on the deck goes to show this could be a very big chunk of users that Microsoft has left out in the cold, and things could get a lot worse if this takes off. Let's talk about this in the article from VGC and go from there. Microsoft support for Windows 10 officially ends today, but a third of Steam users still use it. Security updates, technical assistance, and feature updates will no longer be provided from today. And this was, in fact, on the 14th of October, just a few days ago. The article saying, quote, after October 14th, 2025, your computer running Windows 10 will no longer receive security updates, the company said. In addition, Microsoft customer service will no longer be available to provide Windows 10 technical support. PCs and devices running Windows 10 will still work after this date, but over time they could become more susceptible to security issues. As such, Microsoft recommends that Windows 10 users start looking into upgrading to Windows 11. Now, this is where things can get really sticky, especially in the PC space. We've seen Microsoft talk about how great their increase has been with Game Pass on the PC side. We've seen how Game Pass did not get as big of a price hike as every other platform did with their Game Pass service, and still gets day one games on that ultimate tier for PC for about $17 a month, $16.50 around there. So you're seeing the fact that Microsoft is trying to entice PC gamers to either move to Windows 11 or also use that PC Game Pass service to grow their monthly active users. The problem, though, is, like we saw in the article, at least a third of all Steam users are using Windows 10 still to this day. In fact, here is the Steam hardware survey to prove it. You're looking at Windows 11 64-bit with around 63% of the total user base, while Windows 10 64-bit is 32.18%. This is a massive amount of users applicable and ripe for the picking for Valve to go ahead and transition over to either Bazzite or even SteamOS on their desktop specifically. And this could mean a huge chunk of users leaving Windows itself and no longer being counted as a monthly active user for Microsoft. This is the platform war that nobody is talking about. People are more concerned with my Xbox and my PlayStation and whether or not the Xbox ROG Ally is an Xbox, and not talking about what Windows could potentially be losing and what Microsoft and Xbox could be losing if Steam goes ahead and pulls the trigger on what needs to be done for them to capture a huge amount of people on onto their own platform. If you look at the numbers right now, though, you can see that the Linux user base is still quite small, though. You're looking at around 2.68% of all users on Steam using Linux themselves, with Arch Linux being in fact the most popular. Now, why would this be a big win for Valve and a huge blow for Microsoft? Well, it turns out, according to Culture Crave on Twitter, that Steam hit a concurrent player count of 41,666,455 users at the same time online. That's right. You're looking at 41 million users active at once at any given point throughout the day, ready to go on Steam itself. Imagine if Steam was able to capture those 41 million users. You're already well above the entire user base of the Xbox Series X console base. That is a massive amount of users that Microsoft and Xbox could in fact lose if they continually do this. And you're talking about a third of all users on the Steam platform not having access to updates or security features, and also not being able to upgrade to Windows 11, mostly because of their insane inability to have TPM support active on basically everything, and we'll talk about that too. And you're seeing what could potentially be a huge blow against Xbox and Microsoft in what they're trying to pursue moving forward. Hell, I even brought this up the other day as well. Check it out. If you think Xbox and Microsoft is competing with PlayStation and Nintendo, you're stuck in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. The real quote-unquote war is against Valve and Linux. Microsoft doesn't want a single share of their Windows users to switch. Their bet is to entice you with games, services, and devices to keep you on Windows. And I know I'm sitting here filleting myself about that tweet, but the thing is, it's actually true. Look at this headline recently as well, saying Linux breaks a new record for US market share as people presumably flee Windows for its open source rival. What you're looking at, in my opinion, is honestly a perfect storm for Steam to go ahead and take a massive chunk out of Microsoft's entire user base on their Windows platform. Think about this for just a few seconds as everybody tries to figure out whether or not the Xbox ROG Ally and Ally X is in fact an Xbox, when Sarah Bond herself went on with AMD to determine and say, hey, we're trying to make Windows the best place to play your games. We're not talking about consoles anymore. We're talking about platforms now. Xbox and Microsoft are literally conjoined at the hip, whether you like it or not. And their big play is not going to be about selling 100 million consoles or competing with PlayStation. What their big play is going to be is trying to capture every single platform user to move over to either Windows 11 or in fact try to go ahead and stay on Windows instead of moving to Steam OS. Even though Valve has made massive gains not only in the handheld gaming space with their own operating system, but now Windows is going through and locking a third of Steam's entire user base out to dry from Windows 10 no longer getting updates. The big issue with this is that it forces a lot of users who either A, are not able to upgrade their PCs, can't upgrade their PCs for whatever particular reason, or C, maybe even just don't want to move over to Windows 11, seeing as how we've had a lot of rumors going around with Microsoft's really insane ability to want to go through and have AI capture screenshots of your desktop and then hold on to them for whatever particular reason. And we can talk about that another time with privacy concerns going on as well with Windows 11, seeing as how that is one of the most insane things to happen for any device whatsoever. And even though this could be a prime way of getting a lot of users onto SteamOS and moving towards Linux, which we've seen online quite a bit, the amount of users still moving over is smaller compared to what we've seen with Windows actual adopters. The thing is, are we going to be seeing the same behavior that we saw with Call of Duty and Battlefield 6, where a lot of people were saying that Call of Duty is too big to fail? That was a real article, and turns out that Battlefield 6 is now possibly eating COD's lunch. At the same time, though, you're seeing a lot of big games no longer be supported by Linux at all, mostly due to anti-cheat. You're looking at Call of Duty with their anti-cheat. I think it's Ricochet. You're looking at Battlefield requiring its TPM to be turned on, so you can't do that on Linux. At the same time, their anti-cheat is also active. Apex Legends no longer supports Linux games or Linux users at all. overall, and on top of that, Destiny 2 as well. Even though easy anti-cheat can be turned on simply by a Proton layer with so many other ways, this is going to be a big hurdle to capture a lot of those users to move over to Linux because of this issue, and that's going to be one of the big hurdles moving forward for Valve in the first place. And take a look at this example right here with Battlefield 6. It honestly requires Windows to even be active and play. The only way you can play this game on Linux is through GeForce Now, or even having a Windows PC stream it to your Steam Deck. There's no native support whatsoever, and the game won't even run or operate in any sense of the word. You're looking at 358,000 people playing the game right now, with a peak of almost 426,000 at this moment in time, with an all-time 6-day average of almost 750,000 players. We're looking at 750,000 users in 6 days, almost 500,000 in 24 hours. If Steam was able to have some sort of layer available for anti-cheat on these kinds of games, and that's going to be the biggest hurdle moving forward with all of this. Valve and Steam have to provide some way of trying to entice players onto that platform, and Microsoft and Windows have to do something else in order to keep people engaged on Windows as well, especially with Sarah Bond saying they want Windows to be the best place to play. We are now moving forward, like I said, away from the console war and into the platform war, where two star-crossed lovers who used to be best friends now are bitter enemies to the very end, as Steam has chosen to move over to Linux and Microsoft pushes even further into Windows, but yet pushing away almost 30% of the actual user base on Steam itself. My biggest concern with all of this, though, could be Windows trying to go ahead and create another walled garden like games for Windows Live, instead using it with the Xbox Game Pass app and even Game Pass itself on PC. And the rumors happening in the future of Microsoft having their next generation console being a Windows-based PC hybrid device. Of course, having Windows there as well, increasing the user base another 30 possible million users if you had every Xbox user from a series console perspective buy the next generation of their Xbox console or PC hybrid. That could be a huge boost in MAUs for Windows itself. As of right now, with all of that happening, Steam is poised to capture that 30% of users on their platform who no longer have the ability to have those updates, but there are still hurdles in the road. And this could get really ugly really fast with how Microsoft is pushing forward, again, trying to make Windows that best place to play, and Steam itself also moving forward and saying, hey, we're going to be launching ROS on every other handheld as well. I think what you're going to be seeing right now is Microsoft and Windows trying to push more into Game Pass, trying to push more into services, and dare I even say, put my tinfoil hat on, even require a lot of TPM support or some way of trying to go through and add kernel level anti-cheat onto the actual games moving forward. That way Linux doesn't get a piece of that pie, and this could get dirty very quickly, and I can see Microsoft trying to squash this as quickly as possible. But honestly, I want to see how this turns out. This could be a good way of having a better operating system from Windows 11 in general, and really having a better way overall. If Microsoft did the right thing and provided players and users with a better way of having less bloat in their next generation consoles, and even with the ROG Ally on Windows, that would be a better scene. If they took more pages from Valve directly and said, hey, we're trying to make this more efficient overall, you could see things a lot better. And one of the big things that could really put Windows over the edge on SteamOS, even a lot of users who want to use SteamOS, is providing a Proton layer or a layer of compatibility with being able to play all of your old Xbox digital library of games from the 360, the OG Xbox, and even the Xbox One. That would give a lot of users a different perspective in saying, hold on a second, I can play all the old games I bought already from my previous consoles digitally on this platform, and then apply to the consoles as well in the future. You could see things change very quickly for a lot of users, either wanting to upgrade to get that feature, or even then providing themselves some way of obtaining Windows 11 on that space. This could be something moving forward very quickly that people do not realize and understand what is actually happening, with SteamOS being the true fear of what Microsoft is having to deal with. Not PlayStation, not my Nintendo, and certainly not my console sales. We've moved to the platform platform wars. Depending upon how this 30% of the Steam user base actually goes, whether they upgrade to Windows 11 or if Valve actually pushes out Steam OS directly to a lot of users, or they move over to Bazzite and Arch Linux, you could be seeing a big shift and change into what Microsoft is trying to push moving forward. I guarantee you're going to be seeing more PC-like structures and more PC-like behavior from Windows and Microsoft. You're going to be seeing more OEM devices with Windows 11 and the proprietary game mode attached to it with the de-bloat of Windows on those devices. You're going to be seeing them take steps very similar to what Valve has been doing, but their own little Microsoft twist. And hopefully, though, we get true competition in the OS space where we actually have better reasons of actually trying a different operating system and providing better products for the consumer in the PC space, but also giving console users a better way and a better experience overall and having more freedom of choice on their platform of choice. And that could only mean a good thing for everyone. But who knows what will happen with Windows 10 getting knocked out and no longer supported, and how things will occur in the future with Windows 11 as well, especially if Microsoft is so quick to drop support for older operating systems. If they keep doing this now with other pieces of hardware, especially with their console hybrids, what will happen to those devices then, especially in the future? And that's going to be the bigger question to ask, because if Microsoft can dump away 30% of Steam users simply because they don't want to support Windows 10 anymore, who can see what happens when an entire user base of consoles or PC hybrid users or Windows 11 users are get dumped by the side as well. And that could be a big issue overall, not only for the gaming space, but also the platform and even gaming in general. And that's where I've got a big concern. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about this as well, and what are your concerns too? Are you on Windows 10? Have you moved to Windows 11? Or are you thinking about moving to Linux as well? I want to hear what you guys have to say. So if you like this kind of content, you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. We're doing more PC port reviews, gaming news, Steam Deck videos, fanboy content, live streams every Saturday night, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, and more hot takes like this on the gaming industry. We're on our way to 96K. So like I said, if you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. If you actually want Discord access though and emotes during live streams, become a YouTube member. It's as low as $1. If you don't want to spend the buck, don't sweat it. Just show up Saturday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, live right here on this channel, as around 700 people insult me with AITTS while I wear a banana suit. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you gooners next time. Peace!